Yo guys, it's Kyle coming at you from Bane's Film Reviews. Wow, it's been a while. Time is a hot commodity anymore, but I just saw The Testament of Ann Lee, directed by Mona Fastvold, starring Amanda Seyfried and Lewis Pullman. This follows the Shaker movement that took place in the 18th century that transitioned from Manchester, England to the United States at the time of the Revolution. And it was a religious movement that was a bit absurd and a bit outside the norm for religion at the time. And it is contorted into something of a musical by Fastvold. And I use that term lightly because it's not your typical musical. And we know how I feel. I'm not going to get into that about musicals. I didn't mind this. This was fine. This was not bad. This was good. It's not the standard, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like flash mob-y, like, musical, where, like, all of a sudden everybody knows the words and everybody knows the dance moves and the choreography, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, and you feel like it's just, like, an out-of-body experience that doesn't make, again, any sense. This film is a fever dream. There is no doubt about that. Little about this film feels very real. I know that it is real. I know that it's based on historical events, which is really messed up. But this feels like a fever dream, and like a lot of this didn't really happen. Like what I watched didn't really happen. However, that sort of lends itself to this quasi-musical because this culty feel, this culty vibe that sort of extends the entire film allows the viewer to suspend disbelief. It worked for me. I didn't hate it. I didn't hate the fact that they broke down and sang every once in a while. There weren't a ton of musical numbers. There were probably a half of a dozen full musical numbers, and they were fine. I didn't love the music. I didn't love the choreography, but I could suspend disbelief. I could stay immersed in the narrative, and I was fine with it. I also really loved the score. I had read something prior to this that Fastvold had found this random little bell while filming. She wanted to include this, or it wasn't her, or whoever it was involved in developing this score, found this bell, wanted to incorporate it into the entire score. And I typically look at a score as like pieces of a whole. I would imagine that most, or a lot of other people at least, think of it that way, unless you are like really musically inclined, which I am not. This felt very cohesive and very fluid and like one solid piece. The bell is used throughout and it ties everything together. It's not this piece of the score working here and this piece of the score working here. It is transcending. It works from start to finish. It works incredibly well. I really like the set design. I use the word immersive a lot when I review films because I think that it's necessary to be able to reel viewers in and sort of put them there within the film, within the story, to be able to fully appreciate it. You can appreciate it without that, but that allows you to better appreciate what is happening. And so I feel like the set design and the costume design, this really is like we time traveled back to the late 18th century and we were just dropped there. And we're sort of forced to traverse this really effed up place at the time. Manchester sucked at the time. Religion sucked at the time. And depending on who you are and where you are, maybe you think it still sucks, but it definitely sucked then. And just like the freaking Revolutionary War was happening when they came over to the just America wasn't the United States quite yet when they got here. It's just really immersive and you kind of feel dizzied. Again, this is like a fever dream that dizzies you, and I think that that really works to keep you engaged in the film. And I want to side note by saying I was bored. That doesn't seem like something I was going to say right after I said how immersive it was and how much I felt like I was part of this narrative. But I was bored through a lot of this. This film was just over 2 hours, and it felt like 2 hours. I thought the story was very interesting. I thought it was well scripted for the most part. Sometimes I think the comedy is a bit too subtle, but I think that Thomasin McKenzie does a really great job as Mary narrating this film, and her subtle comedy works incredibly well. But there were moments of the comedy that didn't really work for me because I felt it was entirely too subtle. I like dry comedy. Some of it was lost on me. But yeah, there were times in this film when I was bored, and I remember checking my watch a couple times, and I sort of gauge how bored or intrigued I am by a film based on how many times I check my watch. I know it's late. I know it's a Wednesday night. Like, I'm ready to go home and go to bed. But I checked my watch like 6 or 7 times. I was like, I think it might be like 8:30 now, and it was only like 8:15. Oh, I think it might be like 8:45 now. It was like 8:38. Like, it seemed to move at a snail's pace, so I didn't love the pacing, and that lent itself to me being bored to some degree. But again, I liked this film. I think a lot about this film really worked. There was a song in particular that resonated with me, and it's just because it's so messed up. Not like, oh, life's so messed up. Like, sure, it sucks sometimes, but it was during a very pivotal time in Ann Lee's life within this film that sort of sums up the hardship that she's dealing with, and I won't go any further than that. So I was bored, I was intrigued, I was immersed, I enjoyed some of the music. I didn't love the characters, never fell in love with any of the characters. That did not affect this viewing experience negatively. Not at all. I like this film. I'm surprised that I like this film. It was labeled a musical, but again, it's sort of a quasi-musical that doesn't fall into, the same algorithm that you typically expect where people break out in a song and dance all the time, and it doesn't make any sense to me. This worked. So, The Testament of Ann Lee, I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. I think it is a good film. I think if you like musicals, there's something for you to like. If you like historical dramas or like biographies, there's something for you to like. I think that Seyfried's performance is great. I think she's a great singer. I think that Pullman, who doesn't get a lot of time singing, is also a pretty good singer. There is a lot to like here. I think that it's, again, pretty immersive, and I think it does a nice job of reeling viewers in. And even though I felt myself, again bored, I was never pulled out of the film. So again, 7 out of 10, that's a pretty decent rating. I'm so glad that I finally got back to the theater. Again, time doesn't exist anymore. All right, so I just had not been to the theater since like September, and that sucks. But here I am, The Testament of Ann Lee. So until next time, which hopefully is sooner rather than later, peace.